Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Teskey, retired judge, and this is Justice Redesigned, and I'm your host. Now, if you've already read my accompanying Justice Redesigned essay at stephenteskey.substack.com, and it's titled The Collapse of the DOJ and the Suicide of the Bar, you may notice that this podcast takes a different form, and that's intentional. You see, the essay presents the complete legal and ethical argument as a traditional written analysis. So what I've done is taken the last episode, broken it into two parts of the entire bar card series and the breakdown of justice. Now, the podcast that follows does something different. Rather than simply reading the essay aloud, I've reimagined it as a 5-act closing argument, a dramatic presentation that gradually builds from constitutional absurdity to professional reflection, much like a trial attorney delivering a final summation to a jury. Now, each act corresponds to a major section of the essay. Together, all 5 acts comprise the complete podcast adaptation of that single essay. Now, while additional commentary, humor, storytelling, and historical context have been woven into the presentation, the constitutional and ethical themes remain the same. Now, this approach also marks the transition from my YouTube podcast, the Teskey Briefs Bar Card and the Breakdown of Justice series, to this podcast, Justice Redesigned. The Teskey Brief examined these events as they unfolded. This essay and the 5 acts that accompany it step back from the daily headlines to ask a larger and more enduring question. And it's this: what does honor require of a lawyer when power and professional duty collide? Now, whether you choose to begin with the essay or experience the story through the 5-act podcast, my hope is the same, that we remember the rule of law ultimately depends not upon institutions alone, but upon the men and women who choose to honor the oath embodied in a simple piece of plastic called a bar card. And coming up is Act 4. Welcome back. You know, I spent a lot of time talking about the Department of Justice, about judges, about prosecutors, about attorneys general, about Donald Trump, about Todd Blanche, about lawsuits, about constitutional law. But if you stayed with me through the entire series, you've probably figured something out. This was never really about them. It was always about us, that is, the lawyers. I've carried a bar card for 35 years, long before I ever became a judge, long before I ever testified before Congress, long before I taught lawyers and judges around the country, long before this podcast or social media. You see, back then, the first lesson wasn't how to object or how to cross-examine a witness or how to write a brief. The first lesson was much simpler. It's your reputation is your most valuable asset. Lose a case, you'll have another one tomorrow. Lose an election, there'll be another election. Lose your job, you'll eventually find another. Lose your credibility, and you've lost something that's almost impossible to get back. When I became a prosecutor, way back when, and now I'm back to doing it today after retiring from the bench, people used to ask me, and sometimes I still get this question: who do you work for? Is it the county? Is it the state? Is it the district attorney? Or today, is it the tribe, the Indian Nation in Tucson, Arizona? And my answer was always the same: I work for justice. Now, I know that sounds idealistic, almost naive until you've actually been a prosecutor. Because every prosecutor eventually learns something the public rarely sees. The goal isn't to win. The goal is to get it right. Sometimes getting it right means filing charges. Sometimes getting it right means dismissing them. Sometimes getting it right means walking into your supervisor's office and saying, I can't ethically make that argument. You see, folks, that isn't weakness, that's strength. You know, people often ask me what the hardest job I ever had was. Was it being a juvenile court judge, or when I sat for many years as a superior court judge, being a trial attorney, or way back when I was a chief parole officer? No, the hardest job was being a prosecutor, because every decision carries another person's life. Every file on your desk belongs to somebody's son, daughter, mother, or father. You see, those files don't know whether you're having a bad day, okay? They don't care whether the attorney general wants headlines. They don't care who's ahead in the polls. The evidence is either there or it's not, okay? The law either permits it or it doesn't. And if you forget that, you stop being a prosecutor. You become something else. That's why I've struggled with recording this series over on my YouTube account, the Teskey Brief. Not because it's political, because it's personal. I grew up believing the Department of Justice represented the very best of our profession. Was it perfect? Of course not. Nothing created by human beings ever is. But it stood for something. When a DOJ lawyer walked into court, judges listened. Not because government lawyers always won, but because they had earned credibility. And it's been over generations that they've earned that. One honest representation at a time, one ethical decision at a time, one lawyer protecting the integrity of another. That's what makes the stories we've discussed so painful. Look, folks, I have spent some time with the Department of Justice. I once served as a litigative expert for the Department of Justice at the U.S. Attorney's Office in its Civil Rights Division. I got to know many of those lawyers, and they're top-notch, very professional. And we bantered about many issues, making sure that what we're doing, we're taking the right path. We're doing it the right way. We're abiding by all the rules of ethics. That is real stuff. Like I said, that's not what makes the stories we've discussed so painful, right? Not because institutions are being criticized, because institutions should be criticized. That's democracy. But what's painful is watching the profession begin to forget why it exists. There's a phrase that lawyers use, officer of the court. That's what we are. We're officers of the court. Have you ever stopped to think about that? The word officer, not employee, not political operative, not loyalist, officer. That title carries obligations. It means that before we owe loyalty to any client, we owe honesty to the tribunal, to the courts. Before we owe loyalty to any administration, we owe fidelity to the Constitution. Before we owe loyalty to any president, we owe loyalty to the rule of law. The bar card isn't permission to ignore those duties. It's promise. It's a promise to uphold them. And that's why I worry about young lawyers today. Well, and not because I think they're less ethical. That's not it. It's quite the opposite. Many of them are extraordinary. I worry because they're entering a profession where they may increasingly be asked the wrong question, not what does the law require, but instead, whose side are you on? Those are not the same question. One produces justice, the other produces tribes. I've spent much of my career teaching prosecutors. One lesson came up over and over again. If you're looking for convictions, you'll eventually lose your way. If you're looking for justice, the convictions will usually take care of themselves. The same is true of government. If you're looking for loyalty, you may eventually find it, but you will lose something infinitely more valuable, and it's independent judgment. And once that disappears, the smartest lawyer in the room becomes the quietest. Not because he has nothing to say, because he's learned nobody wants to hear it. That's when institutions become dangerous. Not because everyone inside is dishonest, because everyone inside becomes silent. There's one image that has stayed with me while making this series. It isn't a courtroom, it isn't a judge, it isn't even the Department of Justice. It's a young lawyer standing in front of a mirror, holding a brand new bar card full of hope, believing that this profession still means something, believing that truth matters, believing that integrity matters, believing that one lawyer can make a difference. My prayer is that we never become a profession that teaches that young lawyer otherwise. Because the day we do, we won't merely lose lawyers. We'll lose the very reason the profession exists. Everything we've talked about, every resignation, every lawsuit, every ethical dilemma, every courtroom confrontation has really been about one question. What kind of lawyer will you become? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. This has been Justice Redesigned. Until the next time, be safe. Take care.